In the prior episodes on the world of Scadrial, we have focused on the downfall of the Lord Ruler, the state of affairs in the immediate aftermath of the collapse, the siege of Luthadel, and the return of Ruin from his captivity. In this episode, we will focus on the return of the Deepness and the seemingly inevitable end of the world. Despite an ever-darkening day, there remained some who would not go gently into that good night. The remnants of Kelsia's crew, alongside Elend Venture, continued to struggle and fight for the world they had initially freed from the cruel yoke of the Lord Ruler. After the Battle of Luthadel, Vin and Elend made their way to the Well of Ascension, located within Credit Shore. Despite the best efforts of preservation, Vin's innately good nature ensured that even when presented with nigh-on immeasurable power, she would do what she believed to be correct. As such, Ruin returned to the world, and Scadrial was altered fundamentally in many ways. Chief among them was the return of the mists during the day. As Sazed had discovered at an earlier point, these mists were capable of laying low even the strongest of warriors, seemingly killing at random, as some remained unaffected. With the mists spreading throughout the outlying dominances, more and more of the world became uninhabitable as the dragnet tightened upon those who had persevered through the collapse and now faced the end of times. This force was time infinite. It was the winds that weathered, the storms that broke, the timeless waves running slowly to a stop as the sun and the planet cooled to nothing. It was the ultimate end and destiny of all things, and it was angry. Kelsia. In these times of chaos, the new empire, with Elend as its monarch, provided an island of stability and calm. Yet consolidation alone would not be sufficient, as the world seemed to be imploding before the very eyes of the foremost members of the empire. Therefore, a proactive approach was taken, with the strategy by Vin and Elend revolving around the recovery of 5 storage caches. The Lord Ruler put these caches in place as a failsafe should he be deposed prior to the Well of Ascension refilling. Just as this situation occurred, the caches provided critical resources and knowledge essential in the fight against the Deepness. Or so Vin and Elend came to believe. They also provided evidence that despite his cruel methods and tendency to lean towards outright tyranny, the Lord Ruler cared for the people of Scadrial and their ultimate fate. The first cavern containing such a cache was uncovered on the night the well was revealed beneath Credit Shore. Within this cache was shelving containing canned food and a large metal plaque upon the far wall of the cavern. It showed a map of the final empire, with Statlin City circled, indicating that the next cache was there. Each cache would contain such a metal engraving, as Reshek had known that despite Ruin's supposed imprisonment, it could still corrupt all that was not written on metal, altering it to fit his purposes. Kelsia's former crew had discovered Ruin's corruption of the texts after the siege of Luthadel. Sazed, heartbroken by the death of Tindwyl, realized that the rubbing of Quan's inscription had been changed. Aware that their only hope of countering Ruin and his Deepness lay in these caches, they set about tracking down the remaining caverns. In the process, Vin, Elend and their soldiers were forced to fight the Inquisitors, who Ruin now controlled through their hemalurgic spikes. The new empire won a number of battles in this period, and each victory would bring increasing numbers of Koloss to their side. In the meantime, Tensoon had returned to the Kandra homeland in order to face judgment for betraying the contract and disobeying the holder of his contract, Zane, during the latter's battle with Vin. For his actions he was imprisoned by the first among the second generation of Kandra, Kanpa, who utilized Changar. This ritual essentially consisted of the breaking of the Kandra's bones, and after this they were sealed in a pit with only a singular hole with which the prisoner can be fed. The offending Kandra was then left there for 10 generations of claustrophobic isolation, and after this period was allowed to die of starvation. Sazed had assumed the role of chief ambassador of the new empire, with his first task being negotiations with Ordil Lekal. Ordil was the uncle of Gestes and had assumed the kingship of his faltering domain following his nephew's execution at the hands of Elend Venture. Although he ultimately acceded to the demands of the emperor, swearing fealty and surrendering his independence, he did so reluctantly. Despite this success, and a year passing since the death of Tindwyl, Sazed remained a mere shade of the man he once was. In his despair, he would no longer wear his copper mines, and would instead go through each of the religions he had formerly proselytized. In his search for an answer as to the existence of the divine, he would seek out contradictions in their respective creeds, and should he find any, he would write alongside the debunked mythos, "Religion not true." As Sazed despaired, and Tensoon faced a slow death at the hands of his Kandra brethren, Elend and Vin continued to act as solitary beacons of hope to the ever-dwindling populace of Scadrial. The second cache was found easily within the central dominance, and contained large amounts of lumber alongside a description of the metal aluminum. And while a helpful discovery, it was not the silver bullet they sought, and that would require the upper echelons of the new empire's leadership to range farther afield than the central dominance in search of answers. Spook was sent to Urteau to investigate the new rulership there under a Scar named Quellion, who took the title of the Citizen. This government worshipped Kelsier as the Lord of the Mists, and propagated a brutal campaign against the nobility in their lord's name, which led them to believe they were the only city to have genuinely adhered to the tenets laid down by the survivor. Unfortunately for the residents of Urteau, even their deity couldn't supply their city with water. Spook was soon joined by Sazed and Breeze, accompanied by a few hundred soldiers, to secure the cache there. Vin and Elend were not idle during this period either, as they made their way to Vititan in the southern dominance. This city was now ruled by a Scar named Fatren, who had assumed leadership when the local nobility and members of the Steel Ministry had abandoned the region. Through clever political maneuvering, Fatren kept his people safe and raised a garrison of 1,000 soldiers, supplemented by 1,000 unskilled reserves. However, as the mist grew denser, the city's crops failed, an issue which was worsened when an army of Koloss destroyed the nearby city of Garthwood, drawing some 100 refugees into the city. Although preparations were made, including raising an earthen rampart outside the city, some 3 months after the destruction of Garthwood, a force of 10,000 Koloss set their sights on Vititan. Despite being a capable leader in many respects, Fatren was now sure that his people were doomed. That was, of course, until Elend Venture entered the fray. The Emperor arrived in the nick of time to teach the garrison how to fight the Koloss. In return, he demanded that Fatren bend the knee to him. Despite Fatren's immense hatred towards the nobility, due to his treatment at their hands during the Final Empire, he recognized in Elend a ruler worth following and acquiesced to his demands. From this point, Elend would take charge of the garrison and use the leadership skills that Tindwyl had imparted upon him to inspire his men to sally out and meet the Koloss. This surprised the gargantuan blue warriors as they were setting up their camp in preparation for their assault, and hundreds of them were slain in the initial sally. Although this shocked the Koloss, the battle soon hung upon a knife's edge, with naught more than Elend's charisma to keep his soldiers in check until Vin finally arrived. She immediately engaged the Inquisitor who controlled the Koloss. In a fierce duel, she dispatched the Inquisitor in time to save much of the fighting force of the city. This allowed Elend to utilize his emotional allomancy to take control of the Koloss, ending the battle and saving the city. As soon as the battle was won, Elend and Vin searched for the storage cache, which they quickly located. Within the cache was a substantial amount of supplies of food, water, and the first 8 allomantic metals. The metal inscription contained information on the use of emotional allomancy on Koloss and Kandra, the existence of an 11th metal known as malatium, which was a counter to atium, and the location of another cache within Fadrex city. Elend was then forced to evacuate the city, bringing the peoples of Vititan to Luthadel with him, as the city, despite being capably run and independent, was well outside the defensive perimeter maintained by the armies of the new empire. This decision was not taken lightly, as many of the Scar that Elend brought with him died from the sickness caused by the mist. There were no easy choices in the dying days of Scadrial. nor was it an easy decision on Elend's part to march a force of some 40,000 soldiers, 20,000 Colossus, and a sizable detachment of Allomancers to Fadrex city. However, the storage caches and the ever-darkening days of the world he fought so bravely to protect justified such a move. Upon his arrival, the imposing fortifications and garrison, in conjunction with the casualties which would be wrought should he unleash the full wrath of his Colossus upon the city's people, effectively forced Elend's hand. At the same time, the implacable leader of the city, Araden Yomen, was a former obligator who still yearned for the days of the final empire and maintained his loyalty to the Lord Ruler. To avoid bloodshed, Elend dug in, deciding to besiege the city. Spook, meanwhile, displayed a newfound confidence and capacity for leadership in Urteau, undermining Quellian's government and inadvertently falling in love with his sister Beldre. However, this came at a cost, as the continued excessive use of his powers as a Tinai left him so sensitive to light that he was forced to wear a blindfold at all times. Fortunately, his other enhanced senses compensated for this. During his time in Urteau, he attended the execution of 10 noblemen and made his way to Beldre, where he inadvertently revealed himself to Quellian's Allomancers. They quickly swarmed the Tinai, managing to wound him. A tip of a sword broke off in Spook's arm, becoming a hemalurgic spike, which allowed Spook to burn pewter. However, it also allowed Ruin access to his mind, allowing him to impersonate Kelsier and manipulate the young man. By following the advice of Ruin, Spook would escape his execution by burning down the building that served as his prison. The escape allowed him to meet with Breeze and Sazed, with the group making their base in the cavern containing the cache. This cache contained an immense amount of water to fill Urteau's canals, alongside information on Electrum, which allowed the Allomancers burning it to see potential futures for themselves a few seconds ahead. Confirmation of Reshek's oddly caring nature, despite the state he had founded in the aftermath of taking power, was also evidenced upon the metal plaque. If I am dead, then these caches will provide some measure of protection for my people. I fear what is coming, what might be. If you read this now and I am gone, then I fear for you. Still, I will try to leave what help I can. Although Spook wanted to confide in Sazed about the nature of the voices he now heard, the Keeper's unusually despondent nature in the face of his lost faith made him relent at the last minute. Now maintaining the title of Survivor of the Flames, Spook continued undermining Quellian's leadership by interfering in his executions and killing his soldiers due to Ruin's influence. Leading the group sent by Elend, he further convinced Sazed to reverse engineer the water supply found in the cache to allow him to bring a miracle to Urteau. Ruin's influence had grown exponentially, and the kind, unassuming Spook was making decisions firmly out of character, ultimately bringing the city to the verge of destruction. He initially met with Beldre and hoped to sway her to his side. However, he took her captive when she rejected his advances and brought her back to the cache. He would then return to the city proper and interrupt one of Quellian's speeches. Utilizing the discontent within the city, Spook attacked the platform. Empowered by pewter, he was able to slay Quellian's guards and was about to take his foe's life when his sister Beldre, having broken free, shot coins at Spook, revealing herself to be an Allomancer. This enraged the populace, who realized that Quellian had been an unrelenting hypocrite, slaughtering those who possessed noble blood, but keeping his sister safe throughout his time as king. Riots broke out, and the city was set on fire. Spook also felt betrayed, and Ruin's voice pushed him to kill her and take her spike to use her power. Instead, this led Spook to understand that they were manipulated through the spikes. Spook first removed Quellian's spike before his own, regaining full awareness for the first time since his initial battle with the citizens' soldiers. The Tinai now gazed upon a city aflame. However, the water from the cache was not forthcoming, which led Beldre to admit that she had slain the guards in her escape. With Sazed in tow, they rushed back to the cache. The building housing the cache was likewise aflame. As the trio seemed set on abandoning their initial plan, Kelsier's voice once more came to Spook, encouraging him to continue the fight. Spook rushed into the building, but as the heat and smoke began to weigh upon him, sapping the tinai of his strength, he could barely throw his weight against the machine to get it moving before he collapsed and lost consciousness. However, he saved the city in the process and redeemed himself of the taint with which Ruin had infected him. With Ruin growing in power and the heroes of this age still grasping uncertainly in the dark, it seemed that the Deepness was fated to bring Scadrial to its doom. But the destiny of Shard Worlds was never set in stone, as we will come to see. The next few videos in this series will be dedicated to the dying days of the first era of the Mistborn series, but we're planning to cover the battles of many other fantasy, sci-fi and space opera universes, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Please consider liking and sharing, as it helps immensely, and don't forget to comment. We'll try to read and respond to every comment, as we want to know what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.